Good morning. Morning. As always, good for us to be here. As always, very excited to be able to talk to you all this morning. Really love teaching. I've found that in the past about year or so that I really enjoy teaching Bible class. It's really I really enjoy the preparation that comes with it. So I'm really excited to be able to teach this morning. As many of you know, tomorrow I'll be going back to school, leaving about 11 a.m., driving back to Tennessee. Hopefully won't be back until November. Don't know if we'll get sent home or not. But it's gonna be different. Lots of different rules, lots of different regulations that we're gonna have to follow. And they'll periodically from campus send us out emails telling us what's gonna change, what's gonna be different, what we have to be looking out for. And anytime they do, it reminds me of this one time in chapel where some of the faculty members got up and read all of the rules from Freed that had changed in the past 50 years. Probably the funniest part was when President David Shannon read the rules about facial hair and stroked his mustaches. He said that when he was at Freed, he wasn't allowed to have one. Rules change, things change, the world around us changes all the time. And so I thought that this morning we would talk about something that in the last 20 years has drastically changed the way that we live our lives, the way that we communicate, the way that we talk to each other, the way that we view each other, and that is social media. So today we're going to be talking about the different ways that Christians should act, the different ways that we can use this as a tool to be better people, to be better Christians, but also just remembering that we represent Christ whenever we step out onto the internet. And this isn't a targeted lesson. This isn't at any one person. This isn't based off any one instance that I've experienced. It's based on things that I've seen, things that my friends have told me about, things I know other people have mentioned, things that other people have experienced. This is all out of number one, my love for the church. I think social media is going to keep a lot of people out of heaven, because they don't understand how to act, because they get on there and they hide behind this screen and they can say these rude and mean and hateful things to people. And they forget that when they're on the internet, they're just as much a Christian as when they're not. And number two, it's out of love for people. I don't like to see that people get on the internet and be hateful towards each other, to people get on the internet and be rude towards each other. This is just all about us being able to show the love of Christ a little bit better in some things that we use, every single day. And I think that it's about time that we kind of start this conversation and push this conversation into the right way. So with that, first we're going to define social media. And social media is defined by Oxford Languages as a noun, meaning websites and applications that enable users to share content or to participate in social networking. Now, social media has become this integral part of our lives. We almost can't operate without it now. We use it all the time to communicate with each other. We use it all the time to talk to each other, to share things with each other. You don't write letters and mail pictures anymore. You post your pictures on the internet and you let whoever wants to see them see them. So that's this. You create the content that you want to share. You take the pictures and you share the pictures. You write the post and you share the post. And we're now more connected than ever. For better or worse, people can talk to each other. People can see everything about their fellow humans. And they can do whatever they want to with that information when it's put out onto the internet. And we cannot let our Christianity stop where what I like to call our internet personality starts. Your internet personality is the image of yourself that you put out there for everyone else to see. Because as we're going to talk about a little bit later, the person that you show everybody else when you're on Facebook or when you're on Instagram or whatever is not the person you truly are. Because you're not going to the internet and telling them about all of your problems or all of your complaints or all of your issues. You're probably not going to the internet with every single good thing that ever happens to you. You're probably not typing every single thought, every single feeling that you have. So nobody gets this true picture of who you are. And when they're painting that picture in their minds of who you are when you're using these social networking sites, we have to make sure that the first color that they use is the color of a Christian. So that's what we're going to be exploring here this morning. First of all, there's 4 B's that I want to look at. this morning. The first one is be smart. Think before you post. This is just a basic rule. Before you share something from a Facebook page, read the name of it. Before you share a post, read the entire post. Before you go into a comment thread, read some of the other comments. Make sure you're not saying or doing or drawing attention to something you don't need to be. Think about how this is going to affect the way that people see you. We're supposed to be lights of the world, salt of the earth. Jesus tells us to be in Matthew chapter 5. We can't be a light of the world if we're constantly getting into arguments and constantly nitpicking at people and saying hateful or rude or off-color things to other people when we're on the internet. So we got to think about, number one, how is this going to affect the way that people see me? And because it's affecting the way that people see me, I'm supposed to be the light of the world. I'm supposed to be a Christian. How is it going to affect the way that I walk with God? If I'm constantly going to the internet with my troubles and constantly complaining and putting out all of the things that make me feel bad about myself on there, it's probably going to make me not feel as good, and it's probably going to affect the way that my faith works. It's probably not going to build up my faith. It's probably not going to make me feel better about living on this earth and living as a person. How's it going to affect my walk with God? Because if I'm posting things that have foul language in them or off-color humor or things that are just not befitting of a Christian, then that affects my standing with the Lord. Because not only have I said that this is okay, which is false teaching in a way, but you have forced somebody else who may have a struggle with one of those particular things to begin to view it or to begin to see it. If I know that one of my fellow Christians has an issue using poor language, either they just don't like to see it, that's just something that on their conscience weighs very heavily, or I know that they have a problem using it, and so I share something that has that in it, then I have either greatly offended my brother, which Paul says even if he can't eat around one of his brothers, he wouldn't do it to save him that offense. Or I've caused him to stumble. I put a stumbling block in the way. Think about how this is going to affect your walk with God and other people's walk with God. I am not responsible for anyone getting to heaven other than myself, but that doesn't mean that I shouldn't help anyone that I can. And that certainly doesn't mean that I should stand in the way of anyone who might just not have the same strength of faith as I do. You know, we've got to be humble and realize that even if we have this amazing faith, not everybody else around us does. And we'll talk about being humble a little bit later. But the biggest thing is just pay attention to the Facebook pages and the accounts and the comment threads that we're getting into. You know, read the names of the Facebook pages before you share something from the Facebook page. Go back a couple of posts and see what kind of stuff this account is posting, because the way that social media works is it's based off internet traffic. It's based off clicks. And Mark Zuckerberg himself, who owns Facebook and Instagram, as well as, I don't know the guy's name, I know his first name is Jack, who owns Twitter, have both come out and said that the thing that draws the most traffic and the most attention on the internet are two things: hate and anger. That if you want people to see what you have to say, you need to make them mad or you need to make them upset. That's why Facebook has a little anger react. Because even though we know, and we'll talk about this again a little bit later, even though we know sometimes we don't need to say, this makes me angry, they give us a way to so that they can draw attention to whatever post or whatever thing has been put out there. So we have to think about what we're liking, what we're sharing, what we're commenting on, and what we're doing whenever we're on the internet. Here's directly from Facebook's help website. When you choose to delete something you shared on Facebook, we remove it from the site. Some of the information is permanently deleted from our servers. However, some things can only be deleted when you permanently delete your account. Basically, what this is saying is that when you put something on the internet, it's there forever. Because you can delete it yourself. You know, you can delete Facebook posts. I've done it before. You can delete comments. You can delete things that you've shared. But there's always a record. There's always a record somewhere out there. And, you know, I'm not saying that that somebody's going to go after you and find everything you've ever posted that you didn't like or you didn't think was right or something you accidentally shared or whatever. But there's always a record. when you're on the internet. If you go clicking down a rabbit hole of articles you know you probably shouldn't read, there's a record of that somewhere. If you go liking comments that are saying things that as a Christian you should not be endorsing, you should not be agreeing with, because that's what a like is, no matter what it is, even if it's somebody doing something you don't agree with, but it's your friend and you like their post, you're endorsing whatever they're doing in it. Is even if we know that, even if nobody sees that, there's still a record of it out there somewhere. And if Facebook can keep a record of it, that certainly means that God can. And, I don't think God's going to need to break out his police-grade forensic tools to figure out the thoughts and intents of the heart when we were using the internet on Judgment Day. We have to be above reproach. 1 Timothy 3:2, Titus 1:6, Paul giving the qualifications for elders in these two verses. And not everybody is going to meet all of the qualifications for an elder. Not everybody can be the husband of one wife. But we can all strive to a certain extent to be like these people. These are all qualities that we should want to have as men and women following Christ. And being above reproach, having this attitude that if I do mess up, people are going to know that that's just what it was. It was a mistake. Or, if my Facebook account gets hacked, or if somebody somehow gets in and starts posting things or saying things that I know that they shouldn't or I don't agree with, then I can go sit and tell people, and people will know that that wasn't me. It doesn't look like I'm making excuses for myself. And that's just another section of this that we don't have to get into, is that if you want to be a good Christian on the internet to an extent, you've got to have security. That's just smart living, but you've got to have security so that things like this can't happen. So we've got to be above reproach. Don't post things that are going to discredit you. Don't post things that are going to hurt your Christianity. And don't post so much that nobody listens. If you want to tell people about the gospel, that's great. But if you post so much that you share something about the church or about Jesus, people will go right on by because they think it's just some other thing that you ran across that you thought was funny. And you know what? Post as much as you like on Facebook. Your Facebook account's for you, not for anybody else. I'm just saying that if you intend to use social media as a ministry, that's just one of those little things that you've got to be mindful of. And our second one that we're going to look at today is be kind. Turn to Colossians chapter 3, and whoever gets there first, read verses 12 through 17. Colossians chapter 3, verses 12 through 17.
Put on therefore, as God's elect, holy and beloved, a heart of compassion, kindness, lowliness, meekness, long-suffering, forbearing one another, and forgiving each other, if any man have a complaint against any. Even as the Lord forgave you, so also do you. And above all these things, put on love, which is the bond of perfectness. And let the peace of Christ rule in your hearts, to the which also you were called in one body, and be ye thankful. Let the word of Christ dwell in you richly, in all wisdom, teaching and admonishing one another, with psalms and hymns and spiritual songs, singing with grace in your hearts unto God. And whatsoever you do, in word or in deed, do all in the name of the Lord Jesus Christ, giving thanks to God the Father through him.
Thank you, Bob. First, we're just going to look at a couple things from this set of verses. First of all, people make mistakes. I'm not saying that when you get on the internet, you have to be perfect. Nobody should expect that because people make mistakes. You're going to post things that you're going to regret later. I post things that I'm going to regret later. It happens to everybody. But we've got to remember to be compassionate. We've got to remember to be long-suffering with people when they're on the internet, because not everybody, this is just a tool, not everybody knows how to use it. Sometimes our fellow Christians are going to do things that we disagree with when they're on the internet. Sometimes we're going to do things and we're going to look back at them later and be like, man, I really shouldn't have done that. But we've got to be, as the elect of God, holy and beloved. We have to put on tender mercies. We have to be compassionate. We have to be long-suffering. And when people make mistakes on the internet, we don't need to go in the comments and immediately just light into them and tell them everything that they're doing wrong and everything that's wrong with this and everything I disagree and you're so wrong. This is unintelligent. This is uneducated. Facebook has a private messenger function for a reason. Not everything needs to be public knowledge. Not everything needs to be talked about in front of everybody. And number two, when people make mistakes and we feel the need to correct them, just knowing that they're human, knowing that they're fallible, we need to remember to be humble. This with meekness, kindness, humility, meekness, long-suffering, bearing with one another. We need to be humble. Not everybody knows as much as we do. And I know that can be surprising sometimes, but not everybody has this great knowledge and this vast wealth of knowledge about any given subject that we might have for ourselves. Not everybody has the same upbringing as us. People come from all different walks of life, and they operate and they work together on social networks. We have to be humble whenever we're talking to people. Because we've got to remember that the gospel has told us to bear with people. It's told us to be patient with people. It's told us to be meek, just as Jesus was. And that's not the idea of being timid or shy, as we know. It's the idea of strength under control. When we talk to people about things on the internet, it's really easy to get out of control. Because it's different than a face-to-face conversation, because you don't see the person that you're talking to. You see this picture that they've painted of themselves, or you might not even know who they are. I've seen complete strangers argue with each other on the internet. And it's really easy to forget that the person on the other side of that screen is a human being. Not only are they a human being, it's a soul that Jesus thought enough to die for. And if you go and your goal is to win an argument or to prove yourself right and not to help them get to heaven, then there's something that needs to change. If your goal is to win an argument and not to save a soul, then you have already lost. You have not helped anyone get to heaven, and I think with some evaluation, you might even find that you've kept yourself out. So we've got to remember to love the other person on the side of that screen. That's a sticker that says, I'm just a human being who wants to be loved. I've mentioned before a guy named Brad Montague. He graduated from Freed and then went to the New York University. He has done a lot of really cool stuff. His big thing and what he's been able to market himself doing all across the internet, across social media, is that he just wants to make the world a better place. He wants to spread kindness. He wants to spread love. It's not a ministry, but he comes from the church, and if you look at the things that he posts and the things that he puts out there, you can definitely see that it's Bible-based, even though it's not necessarily Bible-centered. So I really like the stuff that he puts out there, and I've heard him tell the story behind this little sticker before, that one night he was going through some comments that he'd gotten on something he put on Twitter, and he was used to it. He's kind of an internet personality, but somebody had just said these mean and hateful and vulgar things to him that were just blatantly false. And he wrote back to the guy and was like, look, man, I'm just trying to do what I think is right. I'm trying to help people. I'm trying to spread love and kindness, and I don't understand why you're saying these things that you are to me. Well, the guy actually wrote back to him and actually apologized for what he said and said, well, I'm really sorry. I was having a rough day. He had a rough month at his job. He had a special needs child that he was looking to take care of. And then I've heard Brad tell this story before at Freed, and he said it suddenly was different. It was no longer two accounts talking to each other. It was two people having a conversation. And we've got to make sure that whenever we're interacting with people on the internet, it's not our Facebook account talking to another Facebook account. It's us talking to another person. There is a real human being on the other side of that computer, even if they're halfway across the world, even if we've never met them before. There's somebody that Jesus thought enough to die for. And we need to respect that, and we need to value that, and we need to think about that when we're talking to somebody and deciding the things that we're going to say to them. And you know what? Loving the other person is sometimes correcting them. Loving Jesus above all else is sometimes defending the gospel. But you can do that with love. You know, the ultimate act of kindness that you can show somebody is showing them Jesus Christ. The ultimate act of kindness you can give to somebody is preaching the gospel. But we can do that while loving somebody. We can do it without being rude. We can show somebody Jesus without trying to win the argument. We can show somebody Jesus without thinking that we're right. Because, ladies and gentlemen, I will never be right. The Bible will always be right. And if I'm preaching what the Bible says, the Bible is right, and it's not what I'm saying. The Bible will always be right, and we have to love the other person when we're talking to them about the Bible, about the Word of God. We have to represent Christ. When you wear that name, first and foremost the name Christian, before you are, before your name is the first thing that people see on the internet. That's true. But if people know you, they know that before you wear that name, before my name is Connor McDaniel, people should know that I'm a Christian. Before I am a member of this political party or that political party, I should be a Christian. Before I am alumnus of this school or that school, I should be a Christian. Before I'm from that place or this place, I should be a Christian. And when we're doing that, we need to remember that we're representing Jesus Christ himself. We're proclaiming Jesus Christ. We have to let the peace of God dwell in us, the word of Christ dwell in us richly in all wisdom, teaching and admonishing one another. That's biblical. It's okay to teach people on the internet, but we have to do it with love. We talked about Wednesday night at our summer series. Our brother talked just a little bit about this subject and about that even Jesus knew sometimes it's better to just leave the argument alone. Even sometimes Jesus knew it was better to step away and to come back to it later, or not at all, because some people just won't listen. I'm going to be completely honest with you. I've never heard of an instance where somebody's name got changed or somebody's mind got changed because they talked to somebody in a comment thread on a Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter post. I just don't think it happens as much as we'd like to believe. I think we want to be right more than we want to change minds and want to educate people sometimes. And we have to remember that Jesus was all about education. Jesus was all about showing people his Father and telling them what his Father wanted them to do. His goal wasn't to win arguments. I think if you go back and look at the instances where Jesus talked to people, there was some debate, but there was never an argument. Not in the way that we think about it or the way we talk about it today. Jesus, his goal was never to win an argument. His goal was always to win a soul. And so we need to remember that. The ultimate level of kindness you can show to somebody is showing them Christ and showing them the gospel. And we have to remember that just as in our day-to-day interactions, you may be the only Bible that somebody ever reads, the closest that somebody actually gets to reading a Bible might be your Facebook account, might be your Instagram account, or your Twitter threads. We got to remember that. Represent Christ whenever we're on the internet and be kind to each other. Next, we've got to be sensible. Someone wants to read Philippians 2, verses 12 through 15. Philippians 2, 12 through 15. Good. Thank you, Brian. So, work out your own salvation with fear and trembling. Of course, this doesn't mean that you can work out your own salvation, that you can decide how you want to be saved, or that you can save yourself. It does mean, however, that you are the one who chooses whether or not you keep your salvation. You are the one who chooses just how saved you really are. And there's only two options. Either you are or you aren't. Work out your own salvation. Work out whatever you need to do to keep that right relationship with Jesus Christ. We got to work out our own salvation with fear of God, with trembling whenever we're operating on the internet. We've got to make sure that we're behaving as we would any other time, because people are always watching just as God is watching. And so first, work out your salvation. Do all things without complaining. Don't go to the internet with your complaints and troubles. It makes it hard on everyone. Number one, if you go to the internet and you write this whole long post about this horrible thing that happened to you, number one, you have to dwell on it for however much longer it takes for you to write that post. So you're already thinking about it longer than you need to be. Number two, when you go on the internet and you post something that's a complaint or something that's sad or something that brings you down, it brings me down too. because I don't like to see people sad or upset or anything like that, and it makes other people angry for you. You know, be angry and sin not, but some people have trouble with that. Sometimes we cause stumbling blocks for other people. And Paul tells us, do all things without grumbling, without disputing. If you go to the internet and you're always talking about how horrible your life is, why would people want to follow Jesus? Why would people want to follow the same Jesus Christ that you do if he can't seem to give you enough joy in your life to get over the fact that your order got messed up at McDonald's? Not Chick-fil-A, because they don't do that. Why would people want to follow Jesus Christ if he can't give you enough joy in your life to get over the fact that somebody cut you off in traffic? At least they didn't hit you. At least you lived to walk away from it. Don't go to the internet with your complaints, with your troubles. When you talk about the things that you have trouble with, the things that you don't like about the world, and you bring that into other people's lives, it can hurt them. Especially if, we don't know everything that somebody else is going through. And sometimes we want to make out our problems to be a lot bigger than they are. We've already talked a little bit about being humble. Don't ever think that your problems are the biggest in the world. They may be the biggest in your world, and I'm not trying to say that anything you might go through, anything that you might be dealing with, isn't worth the thought, isn't worth the study, isn't worth the prayer. Social media is a great tool if you want to ask for prayers. I've seen people do that. My friends, if we ever want to talk to each other, we want to ask each other to pray for us, we'll usually go to social media. That's how I've communicated with about 90% of my friends back at school over the course since I've been home. And I'm not talking about asking for prayers and doing the work of the church. Social media is a great tool that can connect the church the world over. And that's something that, we use it for here, with our live streams and everything like that. But I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about when we think our problems are so big that everybody is going to want to hear about them and everybody's going to want to solve them, because nobody should want us to have to go through that. Nobody should want my order to have gotten messed up at McDonald's. Forget about the people who would do anything to go to a restaurant, have them spit in their food, and still get to eat. Or children who can't even get a drink of water, but we're mad because we asked for a regular Coke and they gave us diet. Don't go to the internet with your complaints and with your troubles. And you know what? If it's big enough to tell anybody about, it's big enough to tell God about. And if you're telling everybody but God about your problem, then it's probably not going to get solved. If you're telling everybody but God what you're going through, then you're probably not going about solving that problem in the right way. If it's big enough to tell anyone about, if it's big enough to put on the internet and tell the whole world, yes, the whole world, because anybody with the right tools and with the right know-how, even if your Facebook account is private or whatever, can go and find the things that you post, the things that you say, the things that you do. Anything you put on the internet is reviewed by somebody out in California. Somebody sees it. Even if you think it's private, it's only you. Somebody sees it. We've already talked about that. But if it's big enough to tell anyone about, it's big enough and important enough to tell God about. Anytime that Jesus had a problem, he went to his Father. Anytime Jesus was tired, anytime Jesus was overwhelmed, anytime Jesus was feeling tempted, Jesus went to his Father. Jesus has this big following of apostles and disciples. Jesus probably knew a lot of people in his time, even before his ministry started. So imagine if instead of going into the wilderness for 40 days and praying and fasting, talking to God, growing closer to the Lord, before squaring off face to face with Satan, if Jesus had just gathered up all his friends and say, "Hey guys, I'm having a rough day. I need you to be thinking about me." Imagine if he had done that instead of talking to God. Don't go to the internet with your complaints and troubles. It's the wrong place to go. It can hurt your influence as a Christian. It can hurt the way people view your Christianity. And it can get in the way of you communicating and talking with your Father, who will solve any problem that you bring to him. Number 2, we've already talked about this a little bit. Don't get into meaningless arguments. Do all things without grumbling or disputing, Paul says, without complaining or disputing. First and foremost, we don't need to be arguing with our fellow Christians on Facebook. If they post something that we think is theologically incorrect, if they post something about the church that is incorrect, we don't need to be trying to fight with them. It's perfectly okay to message them, say, hey, I have some questions about something you said, and I think that you should consider this. As we've already said, education is biblical. Aquila and Priscilla taught people the way more perfectly. But they did it out of love, which is why it worked. We can't get into arguments, number 1, with our fellow Christians. Now, if somebody attacks the church, by all means, defend it. Defend the faith. That's what we're commanded to do. But I don't think anyone who professes to be a Christian is going to be doing that. So we especially do not need to argue amongst each other, because we are a family. Families aren't perfect. Families can be broken. Families can argue. Families can have disagreements. But we are God's family. And if we can't even agree on things amongst ourselves, that's not really a big draw for people to want to join the church, to want to see the love of Christ, let his love dwell in them, and to follow him. The same way of if we're always complaining about our troubles as we follow Christ, if we're always arguing with people, if we're not making the church look like a group of people that others want to be involved in, then we're doing a lot of harm to the cause of Christ. We're not doing anything good for it. We can't be arguing amongst ourselves. We can't be arguing with other people. Again, if somebody attacks the church on the internet, defend the faith. But you can do it without being rude or without being hateful. The point is not to show everybody you're right. If you are talking to somebody about God, just teach them the Word. Because even if you walk away and nobody thinks you're right, I guarantee you one day they will realize you were. Because my Bible reads that every knee will bow and every tongue will confess. And if that's what I'm telling people, that one day God is going to come back and they need to be ready, even if they don't believe me, one day they will. So don't worry about being right. Don't worry about being correct. God's going to give you that one day. He tells you so. But we do need to be worried about saving souls. We already said the greatest act of kindness you can show somebody is preaching the gospel, showing them Jesus, preaching to them Jesus Christ and Him crucified, showing that there's a way that they can live this life and have a home in heaven with our wonderful Lord and Savior who's done so much for us even before we decided to follow Him. And if our goal is to offend people, that's kind of the big thing now is get offended. If our goal is to offend people, we're not preaching the truth in love. If our goal is to win the argument, we're not preaching the truth in love. If my goal isn't to help them get to heaven, but for me to be right, I'm not loving my neighbor. We can't be arguing all the time. We can preach, we can teach, can't be arguing. And again, be blameless, be above reproach, Paul tells us, that you may become blameless and harmless, children of God, without fault in the midst of a crooked and perverse generation, among whom you shine as lights. Jesus calls us the light of the world in Matthew chapter 5. We have to show people Jesus. We have to be that light, but we also need to be above reproach. We need to be without blame when we do it. We don't need people to say that all we do on the internet is argue, that we never speak out of love, and that we don't actually have the love of Christ that we claim to. So finally, just in the time we have left, going to kind of run through these real quick. Be careful. Be careful that you don't put your value in likes, comments, and shares. Matthew 6:26, Jesus says, "Even the birds of the air are taken care of by your heavenly Father, and how much more value are you than these?" God values you so much more than any number you could get on the internet, any amount of attention that your post can attract, any amount of comments you can get on a post or a picture telling you that's a great idea or that's a beautiful picture or whatever. God values you so much more than that. Don't put your value in these silly, silly numbers when God's love for you is immeasurable. Don't let words like friends and followers cloud your thinking. James 4:10 says, humble yourselves in the sight of the Lord and He will lift you up. Facebook, which is widely regarded as the first social media, was invented by a college kid so that he could meet girls. That's the actual story of how Facebook was invented. And it is designed with that in mind. That's the way it operates. It's meant for you to think that everybody wants to hear what you have to say so that you'll put more of your ideas out into the world, and so that the site gets more traffic, they get more ad revenue or more revenue from companies that put their articles out there. So don't let words like friends and followers think people are following every single thing that you have to say. Remember to be humble when you're on the internet. Remember it's not real. Not everybody is putting out their true life onto the internet. People go through things that you don't see, that you don't understand every single day. We know that, but sometimes it's easy to forget. So don't get down on yourself when people are only posting the good things that happen to them and it looks like their life is just great. Because you know what? They could be going through something absolutely horrible and you have no idea. It's okay to unfriend or unfollow people who post ungodly things. James 1:21 tells us to flee all rampant wickedness, put away all filthiness of the flesh. If my friends on Facebook are posting pictures of them dressed immodestly, I don't want to see that. It's okay to unfollow, to unfriend those people. If people are being hateful, if people are being rude, if people are doing things that as a Christian I should not be seeing. They're posting pictures of themselves holding alcohol. They're posting pictures of themselves in places they're not supposed to be, dressed in a way that they're not supposed to. It's okay to unfriend and unfollow those people, even if you just don't want to. Even if you just don't want to follow them. You know what? Your Facebook account, your Instagram account, whatever, it's for you. You know, that's how I treat mine. If somebody gets on my nerves, I unfollow them. Because life is too short to be worried about what everybody else has to say. I only care about what Jesus has to say, and if we want to talk about that, we'll sit here all day. But if you don't, then to be completely honest, I'm not that interested. You know? And that's why I don't constantly post on the internet either, because I don't feel like people should be all that interested in everything I have to say or everything I'm doing. That's about the only time my mom hears from me when I'm off at college or knows what's going on, so I do it every once in a while. But remember, it's okay to unfriend or unfollow people who post ungodly things, and just because it's polite to like something that your friends post doesn't mean it's right. Because I see Christians who like things from other people of them doing ungodly things because it's their friend or it's polite, it's etiquette now. I think you're doing them a far greater disservice by liking a picture of them somewhere they're not supposed to be or protesting something, whatever, and saying that you're okay with it as a Christian than you would just leaving it alone and showing them you don't approve. You know, one time I saw a Christian like something somebody was at a protest. It was a pro-abortion rally. They liked it, and I was like, why would you say that this is okay? And they're like, well, I don't agree with where they were, but you know, that's my friend, and I wanted to show I support them for standing up with what they believe in. We don't have time to unpack all of that, but that's a very, very poor attitude. That's a horrible attitude. That is a horrible view. When you like something, you're endorsing the idea. Don't endorse things that are ungodly. Don't perpetuate something you don't think should be seen, heard, or taught. We already talked about this a little bit. If you don't think anyone needs to see it, don't post it with a long rant about how wrong it is, because you've just driven up traffic. You've effectively made sure that this thing that you're going to tell everyone shouldn't be seen has been. And it's backwards. And finally, train up a child in the way he should go. When he was old, he will not depart from it. Pay attention to what your kids are doing. Pay attention to the things that they're posting, the things that they're following, the pages they're following, the people they're following, the things that they're liking, the things that they're sharing, the people that they're talking to. I'm not a parent. This isn't a parenting lesson. That's why I saved this for last, because I didn't want to dwell on it very long, because I'm the least qualified person in this room to talk about it. But I watched the internet destroy some of my friends because we all grew up on it. And our parents didn't, not my parents, but their parents didn't know how to handle it. I have friends that are going to have problems in their marriage because they had a Snapchat too early. I have friends who are going to have problems in their marriage because they had an Instagram too early. I have friends that are never going to be able to mentally heal from things because they didn't have the cognitive ability to understand that our value is in what God gives us and not in likes, comments, or shares. If your little girl thinks that the only way she can feel pretty is if she gets a bunch of likes on a picture, or your little boy thinks the only way that his accomplishment can be seen is on the internet, you need to reevaluate whether or not they should be allowed on there. That's all we have time for. Thank you for listening.